Chapter 6 opens in the thick of organized chaos. Keniston no longer has time to sit with his feelings, because the evacuation of Middletown has become a full civic emergency. City Hall turns into a command center, crowded with police, National Guardsmen, transport managers, warehouse men, grocers, and officials, all trying to solve the same impossible problem. How do you uproot an entire town and send it into a dead future world before cold, panic, or confusion kills everyone first? The chapter immediately feels different from the earlier ones because the focus is no longer discovery, but administration under apocalypse. Hamilton is very good here at making survival feel procedural. The end of the world has become schedules, ward assignments, trucks, buses, fuel distribution, and shouting men hunched over desks. One of the most important figures in the chapter is McLean, the big trucking manager who suddenly emerges as exactly the kind of person history requires in a crisis. He is practical, unsentimental, experienced, and decisive. Unlike Mayor Garris, who keeps shrinking from the truth, McLean sees the shape of the problem at once. The city cannot simply flee all at once. That would create gridlock and catastrophe. It must move by wards, in organized stages, with assigned quarters in the domed city, fuel distributed to those still waiting, and careful use of every available vehicle. Hubble immediately recognizes McLean's value, and this is one of the chapter's quiet strengths. When the old world breaks down, new kinds of leadership reveal themselves. Titles matter less than competence. McLean becomes indispensable because he can think in terms of movement, sequence, and capacity. The chapter also shows how total the evacuation must be. It is not just families and cars. It is hospital patients, prisoners, food stocks, cots, blankets, emergency equipment, and every scrap of transport the town can muster. Ambulances, hearses, school buses, patrol wagons, trucks, everything is pressed into service. The sheer detail makes the situation feel real. This is not a romantic let's go find shelter exodus. It is a grim mechanical undertaking involving the sick, the helpless, the criminal, and the frightened. Even the decision to leave hospital patients and prisoners until the last day has a hard practicality to it. There is no room here for idealized heroism, only triage, only order, only the hard arithmetic of survival. And then, in the middle of all this, the chapter returns to Carol, and the emotional center shifts sharply. Because Carol and her aunt belong to the first and second wards, they will be among the first to leave. Keniston goes to see them, and the visit turns out far more painful than he expected. Mrs. Adams is openly weeping, but Carol is worse in a quieter way, hard, bitter, tight-lipped, struggling alone with blankets and mattresses and suitcases. Her grief is not merely about inconvenience or fear. She looks around at the house, the curtains, polished furniture, pictures, china, the accumulated tenderness of generations, and says that they had shelter and warmth already until scientific progress took it away. That line cuts deeply because it turns Keniston into a representative of the force that has destroyed her world. Whether that accusation is fair or not hardly matters emotionally. To Carol, the old life is gone because science went too far, and Keniston belongs to that world of science. This scene is one of the most revealing in the book so far because it shows that the catastrophe is not emotionally equal for everyone. Keniston, Hubble, and McLean are living inside systems, transport, and survival logic. Carol is mourning culture, home, continuity, and beauty. When she breaks down and cries, "My house and all the things I loved," Keniston realizes she is not really mourning objects. She is mourning a whole inherited way of life that has suddenly become unrecoverable. There is a telling little moment where the narration slips into Keniston's impatience at the inability of the female mind to grapple with the essentials, and modern readers will bristle at that, but it is revealing of Keniston himself. He is compassionate, but limited. He understands survival better than grief. Carol, in contrast, understands loss immediately. That emotional divide between them keeps widening here. The next morning, under the red sun, Middletown has become a place of frantic motion. The chapter's title starts to gather force here. This is not just an evacuation. It is a caravan, a mass migration under alien skies. The streets of the first and second wards are jammed with activity. Cars piled absurdly high with belongings, children being rounded up, barking dogs being leashed, buses filling, old engines being coaxed to life, police sirens cutting through the cold. What makes the scene vivid is the mixture of emotions. Many people are not fully hysterical. They are dazed, noisy, even falsely cheerful in places, laughing with that brittle edge that comes when people are trying not to collapse. Only some women are crying openly. Most of the town seems to be operating on adrenaline and disbelief. They are moving because they have been told to move, not because their minds have truly caught up with where they are going. McLean continues to dominate the logistics with clipped, sensible authority. He thinks of practical things others miss: sidecars for motorcycles so they can handle rough ground, tow trucks distributed between the wards for stalled cars, cots and blankets instead of useless artillery. That last detail is especially good. A National Guard officer thinks in terms of field guns, but McLean instantly rejects the military instinct toward force in favor of what the situation actually requires: warmth, shelter, transport. It shows again how old institutions are having to relearn themselves. Survival in this new world is not about fighting an enemy, it is about keeping civilians moving and alive. Left suddenly in charge of the First Ward, Keniston finds himself overwhelmed by a flood of demands. The people's cars are overburdened with far too much baggage. Not only blankets and necessities, but radios, musical instruments, portraits, hobby horses, keepsakes, all the material proof of family identity. This detail is heartbreaking because it shows what people do when forced to choose what remains of their lives. They do not pick only what is practical, they try to carry meaning with them. Keniston has to order some of this junk torn off so the cars can move, and the brutality of that is quietly devastating. A framed picture, a toy, an instrument, each of these may be absurd cargo in survival terms, but to somebody it is the remnant of the world they are losing. The evacuation is already stripping people down to necessity, whether they are emotionally ready or not. Keniston's concern for Carol runs beneath all of this. He watches for her blue coupe, gets her as close to the front as he can, and then is pulled away again into responsibility. That repeated pattern defines him in this chapter. Every personal impulse is interrupted by the demands of collective survival. He wants to protect Carol individually, but events keep forcing him into the broader role of organizer and leader. The more he becomes necessary to the town, the less he can belong to one person. Then comes one of the most memorable sections of the chapter, the problem of those who simply will not leave. On North Street, Keniston finds old people clinging stubbornly to their houses with a kind of ancestral defiance. A shawled old woman insists she has lived there all her life, and her mother before her, and she will not leave now merely because it has got a little cold. That line is tragic and almost darkly funny because it shows how utterly the human mind resists impossible truths. But Keniston finds the argument that finally works. Not abstract danger, but the little granddaughter visible inside the house. He tells the woman plainly that the child will be frozen dead in days if she stays. That cuts through pride, tradition, and disbelief at once. She does not argue anymore. She only asks dully where to go. It is a powerful moment because it shows how people can be moved only when the catastrophe becomes personal. The scene of the old man being carried out in a wheelchair, cursing and striking at the men helping him, adds to this portrait of reluctant exodus. Not everyone can be reasoned with. Some must simply be moved. And in the square there is yet another response to apocalypse, a gaunt preacher shouting from beneath the sycamore tree about the end of the world and punishment for sin. This note ties back to earlier chapters where religion and cosmic disaster have begun to merge in the townspeople's minds. Even as trucks and buses assemble and men bark orders, there remains this undertone of biblical reckoning. The caravan is not only physical, it is spiritual in the way people are interpreting it. Then the crisis sharpens into near panic. The people already assembled want to leave now. They do not know the way, they do not have the order to move, and they are starting to jam the streets, blare horns, bump fenders, and surge against the truck barricades. This is one of the best suspense passages in the chapter because the danger is not cold or monsters, but crowd psychology. Keniston knows that fear has been necessary all along. Only fear strong enough could force people to abandon their homes. But now that same fear threatens to break discipline and turn the whole evacuation into a stampede. He rides along shouting for order, but the noise of engines and horns swallows his voice. It becomes clear that once mass panic reaches a certain volume, reason can barely touch it. Even Mayor Garris is infected by it, nervously urging that perhaps they should just let everyone go. That would have been disastrous, and knows it. They have to wait for signal, however frayed everyone's nerves become. Then Hamilton gives the chapter one of its finest auditory moments. Over the roaring motors and shrieking horns rises the terrible unending wail of the tube mill whistle. It sounds like a requiem, almost like the voice of the old world itself crying out one final time. And because the whistle is familiar, a sound belonging to Middletown's vanished industrial life, its use as the signal for departure is perfect. The mill whistle, once the summons to labor, now becomes the summons to exile. At once the trucks roll, ponderous and necessary, and the caravan begins to move, leads in the jeep with big diesels abreast in front to prevent reckless cars from surging past. The procession winds down Jefferson Street, across the vanished riverbed, past locked houses, playgrounds, silent mills, beer signs, little frost-killed yards, past everything that made up ordinary Middletown life. Hamilton handles this beautifully. The road itself becomes an elegy. Every landmark they pass is not just scenery, but farewell. The town is not exploding behind them in flame. It is simply being left, shut up, abandoned to cold and time. That quietness makes the departure even sadder. Then they reach the line of demarcation, that eerie border between old familiar America and the future Earth. Crossing it is the true climax of the chapter. One moment there are houses and streets. The next there are barren, rolling ochre plains under the gigantic red sun and the screaming wind. Behind Keniston stretches the enormous caravan, buses, trucks, shiny wagons, broken down cars, jalopies, everything crawling out of one age and into another. And that final image is unforgettable, a whole town, in vehicle form, creeping out of the earth that is gone forever and into an unknowable tomorrow. It is not just an evacuation, it is almost a migration of history itself. Middletown has become a refugee civilization. What makes Chapter 6 so powerful is that it blends the epic and the ordinary. On one hand, it gives us a massive symbolic image, humanity literally caravanning into the future. On the other, it never loses sight of the practical and emotional details, the overloaded cars, the crying ant, the old woman on the porch, the family portraits, the dogs, the stalled engines, the toys, the locked doors. That combination is what makes the story work so well. The apocalypse is huge, but it is experienced one mattress, one suitcase, one child, one frightened old person at a time.